What does the Bible teach about business? That's what we'll uncover together on the Business in His Image podcast. This show explores strategies from the Bible that will help you grow your business, strengthen your walk with Jesus, and help you reach your God-given potential as an entrepreneur. The Bible is filled with practical wisdom to help you live for God while using your gifts. Let's unpack what that means for you and how you can use biblical truths to build a thriving business that honors Christ. Now it's time to dive in. Today on the show, I have a very special guest. I am so excited to introduce George Kamel. He's a Ramsey personality and a personal finance expert, and he's followed the Ramsey proven money plan to go from a negative net worth to a millionaire in under 10 years using biblical principles. So I am so excited to have him on the show here today. He's going to drop some gems from his personal story, from his new book, and so we have a lot to dig into today. Welcome, George.
It's so good to be here. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Now, I personally binge watch your YouTube channel. I'm going to publicly admit that.
Thank you. That means the world.
I mean, it's just so good. I've seen the way that you effortlessly debunk so many toxic money myths, or as Dave Ramsey would say, the TikTok mythology out there on the internet streets. It's super fun to watch, but you do it with facts. And that's what really stands out to me, right? Super tactical. It's research based, not based on emotions, not based on opinion. So I'm excited for you to share some of the money traps that you see entrepreneurs fall into, because I know that like personal finance, entrepreneurship, there's intersection there. One is impacting the other for sure.
Mm. Yeah, with entrepreneurs, especially early on, there's a myth out there that debt is the path to building wealth as an entrepreneur, to scaling your business. And Dave Ramsey has proven that wrong over 30 years of,
Yeah.
he went bankrupt, he did it with debt and then learned the hard way. And he built Ramsey from a card table in his living room with straight cash. And it's been amazing to see. And people don't believe him when he's like, yeah, this
Yeah.
place is, we don't have a mortgage. We don't have credit cards in this building. We use company issued debit cards and
Yeah.
we move at the speed of cash. And now with Entre Leadership, Dave's business brand, it's been so cool to see business owners out there grow and scale their businesses and grow their teams at the speed of cash without the stress and risk of debt. And that to me is the most inspiring business story. Anyone can go out there and get
Yeah.
$100,000 in a business loan, but we see the stories when people fail and the business fails and they still have this debt. It's like, you went to college and got a degree for $200,000, but you didn't graduate. And now you still have the
Mhm.
$200,000 in debt to pay without the degree to show for it. That's the best analogy I can make to the stress and problems I'm seeing out there with entrepreneurs. So that's the big one. And the other one is just all of the weird tax write-offs. Like, well, I'm going to buy a $78,000 car so I can
Mhm.
write it off on my taxes because this
Mhm.
is what smart entrepreneurs do. And
Mhm.
again, there's so much mythology out there with how much I'm going to spend versus what I'm going to actually save in taxes. And it's too much brain calories burned when you really should just be focusing on how do I serve the customer well.
Mm, absolutely. And you once hosted the Entree Leadership podcast. So I'm sure you heard like so many stories coming in, and even on the Ramsey show as well. And then on top of that, watching Dave build this amazing business that's serving so many people and doing it debt free. So, for those out there who can't conceptualize this, right? Maybe they're really struggling financially. They're seeing this business as their way to freedom, but they don't see how they're going to be able to build that business without resources. What are some practical things that they can do to actually get the business going, get income, but do it debt free, do it God's way?
That's a great question. Well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there, they're very passionate and they're very excited, but that can lead to shortcuts, and shortcuts don't lead anywhere worth going to. And what that looks like is we had a call on the Ramsey show this week, and a guy said, "Hey, I have this opportunity." That's usually a red flag right there that you're trying to justify a purchase you shouldn't make. When you're like, "I have this amazing opportunity to go $30,000 into debt." That's not an opportunity. Or I have
Mhm.
this amazing opportunity to borrow all this money from family that I told them I'd pay them back. These are going to add stress, risk, and relational damage later on down the road. So this guy wanted to spend $30,000 that he didn't have to buy a mini excavator that he could go then rent out and start an equipment rental business.
Mm.
and he was gonna try. He said he could make $350 per day renting this out, and I was like, okay, you're gonna need to lock in almost 90 days of rentals just to break even on this. And so we just told him, start small, go on Facebook Marketplace and buy a
Yeah.
used one that you can pay for with cash, and rent that one out until you have enough money to buy the upgrade with cash. And that's the hardest part for entrepreneurs because they're so excited and they don't want to wait 6 months or a year or
Mhm.
3 years to save up the cash to get this thing off the ground. But every successful entrepreneur that I found, they are so scrappy and so resourceful, and they figure it out. When they take that off the table, they find
Mhm.
another way. And those are the most inspiring stories, not the ones who went
Yeah.
into a whole bunch of debt and it somehow worked out. Those are the ones that get flashed on Instagram, but it's not real life.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think too, God gets more glory out of it, right? When we're kind of put in a position where there's no option, right? Debt is not on the table, the resources aren't there. It pushes your faith to believe God for what you believe He told you to do. If God told you to do it, He's going to provide, right?
Amen.
I love what Dave said. Dave said, I heard him say, if we don't have the money for it, God said no, right?
Oh,
So
I love that.
that was a good one. That stuck with me. So whatever it is that God has put on your heart to do, He's going to give you the wisdom on how to do it in a way that glorifies Him, in a way that's not going to burden you and your family, because the Bible has a lot to say against debt, despite what our culture says, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's over 2,300 scriptures just about wealth and possessions and debt. And it's fascinating when you look into it. There's no verse that positively speaks about debt
Yeah,
in your life.
exactly.
I mean, we know Proverbs 22:7, the borrower
Mhm.
is slave to the lender. Romans 13:8, let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing
Yep.
debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. That's the best Jesus juke right there. It's like, well, there is a type of good debt, Joe, the debt to love one another. It's like, oh, so I love the way that the Bible speaks about debt, that it's
Yeah.
a burden in your life that you
Yeah.
need to remove immediately.
Mhm.
And I think it holds us back not just in business and in finances, but it holds you back in life. The emotional weight it has, the relational weight it has when family members have co-signed and you owe people money in your life, you're not going to sleep as well. And now we're getting more research on the scientific side of that. And the Bible just got there a few thousand years early.
Right. Now you touch on a lot of stuff, a lot of junk too that's going on in our culture, that's going on the internet, and I love your approach to it. I'm really curious what you have to say about this new rise of internet influencers that are saying things like, make six figures in 30 days and work just 2 hours a week. We've all seen the ads on YouTube. I'm even watching your show, I get them all the time. And even programs like that are unfortunately bringing people into debt because they're feeding into that story, right? They see someone who somehow, maybe they invested $1 million in ads and they made another $1 million back and just broke even. And now they're trying to sell you on this idea and get you into debt by purchasing their program with money that you don't have. And it's bad. So, what do you have to say about that? I'm sure that just makes your brain go bonkers.
Oh, yes. It's exhausting, and people send these videos to me all the time, either saying, "George, is this true?" or "You need to
Mhm.
react to this." And so I the DMs are full of those all day long, and I could devote my life to it, but life is too short to just react to videos that make me angry. That's not gonna
Yeah.
turn me into a good person. But yes, there's so many people out there who just wanna sell you an online course, and if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And if
Mhm.
it sounds like a shortcut, run the other way, because
Yeah.
entrepreneurship is hard work. If it's 2 hours a
Yep.
week and you
Yep.
can do this in a weekend, it's probably not a sustainable
Yeah.
solution.
Amen.
And so, people always wanna go, "Why work for the man working 9 to 5 when I can run my own business and have my own schedule?" I'm like, "Your schedule is gonna look like 7 to 7 for the first 5 years
Yeah.
you run this business." And so
Amen.
for young
Yeah.
people out there, they're trying to have time freedom, but what they don't understand is getting a business off the ground is way harder than any 9 to 5. And, a lot of people try it, and it's not for everyone. And so I want to encourage people that I love entrepreneurship. I learned early on, I had the self awareness to go, I should not be running my own business. I want to be able to focus on what only I can do. And as a business owner, you're doing 19 jobs. And the chances are you'd hate 18 of those jobs and you got into it for that one job. But unfortunately, you have to sit in the Excel spreadsheet and do the bookkeeping and do the marketing and do the sales and post the tweet, even if that's not your strong suit. And so there's beauty in opting out and saying, listen, I love the entrepreneur life, but I'm going to go work for an entrepreneur or work for a business to focus on what I am great at. And maybe one day I'll get that thing off the ground that I really want to launch. It's okay to just say that out loud.
Yeah, right, and I know I've heard Dave say this that, sometimes the best part-time job that you might have is another side business, right? And there's nothing wrong with people out there who are listening and they don't see a way out. Maybe you don't just, you know, go and quit your job and run into it, but maybe you just do it on the side as you're learning from somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that either. Dave talks about
Yes.
that all the time in his book. Yeah.
And our friend Ken Coleman, a fellow Ramsey personality, as I
Yeah.
co-host the Ramsey show with him, we always get those calls and we love to take them because it's an exciting thing where they go, "Hey,
Mhm.
should I quit my full-time job and jump
Yeah.
into this thing over here?" And we're like, "Hey, we don't like the idea of a leap."
Right.
I like the idea of
Yeah.
just getting the boat close to the dock and you just step into it, and it's a very natural
I love that.
progression versus I'm gonna leap and hope for the best, and that's usually what people are doing when they go, "I'm gonna quit my full-time job making 50 and my side hustle made 1,000." And we're going, "Okay, well, pause. Let's see if
Right.
we can work an extra 20 hours on the side hustle a week to get that closer to at least half of your income. And that way, if I did this full time and I doubled my input, I'd have double the output. I would be able to replace my income and cover my expenses." And those are the situations where we go, green light, you are ready to do this. You're crushing it. Some people are making more in their side hustle than in their full time job. And those people were like, you're doing it, go
Mhm.
for it. And
Yeah.
so those are great situations. But for those that aren't there yet, it's okay, and go slow and go at your own pace. There's life involved too here. You got families, you have kids, there's more responsibility as you get older and step into family life that, when I was 22, I was doing all kinds of things. And now as a dad and a husband, it's just harder to do. And so it's okay to move at a slower pace to go at the speed of cash and avoid risk.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and the Bible talks about that too. There's a verse that talks about, the one who gathers money little by little, they're gonna make it grow, right? So
Proverbs
I
13:11, wealth
yeah,
gained hastily will dwindle. Whoever gathers little by little will increase it. It's one of
yeah,
my favorite wealth building verses because it just reminds us to live like the tortoise instead of the hare, to be the
exactly.
crock pot in a world full of microwaves. And it's encouraging because it helps me to kind of turn the blinders on to all the flashy, trendy stuff like, well, crypto and NFTs. And dude, you got to get in this permanent life insurance thing because that's how wealthy people
Mhm,
do it. And I'm like,
mhm.
nope, I'm going to gather little by little. I'm going to put money away into that savings account, that retirement account year after year. And I will keep the wealth I've built instead of seeing it disappear because I gained it too quickly. And we see that with lottery winners all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good, and I think too, people there there's something going on in people's minds when they keep hearing these stories, right, of like, "Oh, I did this thing online and it blew up and I made $1,000,000 and I left my job," and then they go and make a course about it, and I'm like, I feel so passionate now about exposing this because I think that, God can bless you for sure. He can give you an idea and make it successful. But like you said, the Bible shows us over and over that a lot of times God does things gradually. And so this get rich quick stuff, it's fantasy, right? What impact is that having on our culture and people's mindsets when they see these stories, right? They're not really showing the whole picture. They're just kind of giving you the highlight.
Yeah, I cover this in depth in the book in the investing traps chapter. And at the end of covering all of these investing traps and given my hot takes of why they're not the path, I really searched to the root of what is the root of all of this. And there was three things that I found. I called them the three stooges of wealth building, and it's fear, greed, and pride. At the end of the day, those are the three emotions underlying a lot of these traps and mistakes and emotions that we're feeling. And so fear, it's the FOMO. It's, oh my gosh, I need to get in this now. Or, hey, the economy's tanking, so I need to go do this real desperate move or go buy a bunch of gold.
Yeah.
And then pride is, hey, I know better than all these other people. I'm going to be the one to pick the single stock or to have that $3 million business by going into all this debt and making a really risky move. And then of course there's greed, which is I want more than what God is providing. I want to get rich so
Mm.
quickly
Mm.
that I can surpass all of my friends and have all of these
Yeah.
earthly possessions. And that's what, I see a lot of that in crypto. It's, hey, I don't want to invest in a 401k because that's going to take too long. So I want to choose the right coin that's going to do 10x in a year versus 10% over the next 30. And those are the three emotions I think we need to really grapple with if we're going to build wealth the right way. Because what it ends up, you said, what's the impact? Well, people go broke, people go bankrupt, people's
Yeah.
marriages are destroyed, families are broken, jobs are lost. And so all of those don't lead anywhere worth going. And those are the reasons I'm out on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this a little bit about the importance of like, longevity. Proverbs 20:21 says, "An inheritance claimed too soon will not be blessed at the end." What can happen if people, let's say it works out, right? They their business blew up, they got success, they increased their income, but they didn't work out their money issues and their habits first. What are some of the consequences that can come with that success? I'm using air quotes here, when you don't have the right money habits.
Mm. Well, I mean, this is the prodigal son story. This is, I got a bunch of money real quick and
Yeah.
I blew it real quick because I really wasn't prepared to manage this well. I was not a good steward of these resources. And I just see that the faster you make it, the more likely you are to make that decision. Now, it's not to say some people had amazing success and they made money in a few years versus working at that for 30 years. But the ones that worked on it for 30 years, goodness gracious, they know the work it took. And so they're not going to
Yeah.
just go squander all of that. And the parable of the talents is another great one. And are you going to plant this in some real
Mhm.
good, rich soil, or do you not have the foundation that's ready? And is it too rocky for anything to really grow out of that? And I think there's a picture there of what it looks like to be a good steward. And so we tell people whenever they get a big sum of money on the Ramsey show, we tell them to pause. Just
Mm.
don't make any decisions for the next 6 months. Leave it in a savings account and just let it simmer, because we get too starry eyed as fallen humans when we see that sum of money sitting in the
Yeah.
bank account and what we could do with it, and all of our dreams start to kind of muddy the waters of what we should do with this, which is use it to bless others, to continually build wealth over time instead of just drain it down to nothing so that we can have some temporary pleasure. And so, I always go back to Ecclesiastes, which is like the most emo, awesome book of the Bible, of just saying like, "Hey, listen, I've done it all. I've spent it all. It's meaningless." Like
Mhm.
there's really, at the end of the day, like these earthly possessions, we can't take it with us. You never see a U-Haul coming behind a hearse to deliver all the goods that was in the
Yeah.
storage unit. And so it's a good reminder about what really matters in this life. And it's not more stuff and more houses and a big pile of money in the bank. But the Bible also says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so you've got
Mhm.
to grapple with, hey, listen, while it's fun to spend while on earth, and it's not bad to build wealth, you should also be thinking about generationally what you can do to set up the next generation and have that eternity impact ripple.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like money is a tool that God uses to do his work on the earth. So it's like when you have we have to have kind of that mentality, have that why, that purpose. Otherwise, it's just like you said, it's empty, right? Like it says in the book of Ecclesiastes. And it will feel empty. You'll feel empty if your purpose for gaining wealth and increasing your income is simply just to, just to have fun out there. It will get boring very quickly.
Yeah, and that's a big differentiator with Ramsey. As I've collaborated with a lot of personal finance YouTubers out there, and they're all great folks and they're doing really well. They're so successful. Their net worth far surpasses mine. I'm talking guys who have a net worth of $20 million. And I asked them, I'm like, okay, what's next? And they're like, well, I don't know, 25 million. Like there's
Mm,
no end to this race. And it's just this exhausting chase, and it reminds
mhm,
me of the book of Ecclesiastes about the endless chase and how everything is
mhm.
just so ephemeral and you're just chasing the wind. And so I love that mentality of just going, what is the why? Well, at Ramsey, we have a much deeper why with our faith underpinning of, hey, we're stewards. We're meant to
Yeah.
impact the kingdom on this side of heaven while we're here. And that changes the way I handle money. It changes the way I go after money. And it gives me a lot more peace and contentment that, God gives me my daily bread. I don't need to go chase after the next million. If God is
Mm.
intending for me to have that, it will come if I'm just diligent and faithful today.
Oh, I love that. So for those who are listening and they're saying to themselves, I want that financial peace in my life, whether it's personal or in their business finances, what are the practical things that they can do to have more money and less stress, but do it God's way?
Well, number one is get your personal house in order. As an entrepreneur, people go, well, it's the business debt. I'm like, well, whose name is on the business? Like, who signed
Right.
those papers? Well, I did. And so don't misunderstand that you're going to have a really hard time building a business if your personal finances aren't in order. And so that means we got to get out of debt. We got to stop playing the games of these credit card companies thinking that the sky miles are going to bless us and that
Mhm.
this cash back is going to be our ticket. These are not blessings. And it's causing us
Yeah.
psychologically and financially to make money mistakes and spend poorly. And so getting out of debt and getting an emergency fund before you start a business is so key. I mean, it's you gotta kinda put your own mask on first before you can go build this thing over here. And so I found that if you can avoid that in your personal life, you tend to avoid it in your
Mm.
business life. Very rarely do I see someone who goes, "Hey, we got out of debt in our personal life, but then we try to launch a business with 100,000 in debt." Or vice versa, where they're
Mm.
running a business debt free, but they have a ton of personal debt in their life. And that holds people back. And it's not the fun news they want to hear when they call into the show. And I go, I
Yeah.
love that you wanna start this business. You got 3 years ahead of you of just cleaning up this mess before you start investing anything into this business. And so now that side hustle of starting this business could be a way to pay off the debt. And that's a beautiful picture because you get the experience and you're starting to dip your toes in the
Yeah.
water while accelerating your financial goal. And that's something I did when I was getting out of debt. I had about 6 or 7 different side hustles that I probably could have turned into full-time kind of entrepreneurial marketing consultant and musician and doing film and all these different things that I loved, but I found that it was a great hobby and side hustle to get me out of debt, but it wasn't what God had for me for the next decade of my life.
Mm. And I think it's so important too to make sure like we're hearing from God about his will and his plan. Did God tell you to start that business? Or is he telling you to do it, but maybe like you said, you're starting on a small scale. You're not pouring all your assets into it, right? I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, well, a lot of Dave likes to joke that, "Hey, is that the spirit in your gut, or is that just last night's pizza?" Because a lot of us just get a little excited, and it's easy to go, "Well, like, well, if this is in my brain, then God must have put it there, and therefore I need to go do this. This is my calling."
Yeah.
And I'm not here to judge whether or not it's truly God or not. That's not my place, but I think it's wise to ask yourself, was this over a period of time with repeated signs as you've been digging into the word and prayer that this is where you're meant to be? Or did you see a TikTok and all of a sudden it was like, this is God's will for my life?
Mhm.
Because there's a
Mhm.
huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just wanna hone in on that fact of, like, when God does tell you to do something, use wisdom about how to execute. Don't over spiritualize it and just like George says, you take this big leap, like, still use wisdom and the common sense he gave you as you're executing. There's a Bible verse that I love, and it talks about taking hold of common sense, right? All throughout Proverbs, it talks about do not let wisdom out of you. Take hold of common sense. And God shows me over and over again, whatever it is in business or other aspects of your life, use wisdom, use common sense, think things through. He gave us a brain, and that will save you from making so many mistakes in life.
Yes. And if it looks like debt, I'm telling you that is not God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Run the
know
other
that's a
way.
wild thing to say, but if you're ever like, well, God was calling me to go $100,000 and nope, sorry. That's last night's pizza talking. That's your own human brain at fault here. So don't blame God when it doesn't work out and like, well, God told me and
Mhm.
now I'm 100,000 in debt. That's not how
Yeah.
it works. The Bible's very clear. That's not how God operates. And he's not a fan of debt. If you look at his word.
Yeah. And George, today you are a net worth millionaire. Can you talk about quickly like what that means? Because even for myself a few years ago, when people think millionaire, they think you're making $1 million a year, right? and I
I wish.
right.
That would be fun, but yeah, a millionaire it's gotten a weird connotation,
Yeah.
and when people think about millionaires, now they're thinking about billionaires by accident.
Mm,
They're thinking about
mm,
that lifestyle, they're thinking Taylor
mhm.
Swift, private jets. Millionaires, it takes 1,000 millions to get to a billion, and so I won't see that in my lifetime unless God does something miraculous, and I'm okay with that, but millionaire just means that you have a net worth, meaning what you own is worth $1 million between your retirement accounts, the equity in your home, the money in the bank, cars, whatever those things may be. And so the formula is really simple. It's assets minus liabilities equals net worth. What you own minus what you owe. And what's beautiful is that when you get out of debt and you don't have a mortgage payment, you don't have anything on the liabilities column. And so it's all just building your net worth from there. And so that's what my wife and I did. And she works here at Ramsey too. And we decided, even before we got married, that we wanted to live a debt-free life, that we wanted to raise a family in a debt-free household. And so in our early 30s, we got our house paid off. And that's allowed us to have more margin, more options, more joy,
Mm.
with still another 30 working years ahead of us to, bless others and live freely and spend and have some really fun experiences. So it's that simple. And there's
Yeah.
nothing fancy I did. I'm a W-2 employee for the last 11 years here at Ramsey. I didn't start and launch in a huge business. I simply really was faithful every day for
Yeah.
11 years, got promotions and became a Ramsey personality. And, my wife and I didn't have a six-figure income until we got married. And so this wasn't like, well, George must have just had this insane income and that's how they did it. This was diligence. This was just going,
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of debt as soon as I can. I'm going to put money away into a 401k at 15%. I'm going to get the house paid off as soon as I can. And with the house appreciation and investments growing with compound appreciation, all of that, you just look up one day and your net worth statement says, oh, you guys have a household of millionaires. And so that was a really cool milestone. And again, it didn't change my life. We didn't go out and buy a boat and, retire on a beach somewhere. We still live the same life. We just have more margin and we can take care of our stuff better. We can get some nicer things, but it's not a huge drastic change when you go from 999,000 to a million. You
Mm.
still got to pay the bills. You still got to wipe the dog's tushies when they come in.
Yeah.
And so it's a very normal life, but it's a better life.
Oh, for sure. I think that principle applies to entrepreneurship too. Like, things happening gradually. And Dave talks about that because, Ramsey is a huge company. The Ramsey show is number one in the country right now, but it took time to get there. And Dave, like you, worked hard for a long time and God grew the company gradually, just like God grew your income gradually. So there's definitely something to be said about that principle. Can you peel back the curtain just a little bit and talk about some of those uncomfortable sacrifices that you had to make along that journey? Because it's definitely not like a rocket ship, right? Where you're like point A to point B, it just happened. Like there's a process there, there's sacrifices that are being made that people don't see.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum that has to be built, and that usually happens later on in your life and your career.
Mm,
And Dave always jokes that he's a 30-year overnight success because people are always like, "Wow, Dave, like
yeah,
look at this. This just
right.
happened." And he's like, "Yeah, where were you 30 years ago?
Mhm.
During the hard times." And so when I started 11 years ago, we had 300 team members. Now we have almost 1100. And so that took time to build, and Dave truly wasn't in a rush. He was
Mhm.
aggressive and wanted to
Mhm.
scale this thing and build this thing that God had, given him to steward, but we do things at the speed of cash. And so even having our own building, that only happened in 2019. When Dave
Wow,
built a
wow.
custom building just for this place to house all of us. And so it's been really cool to see from the leadership level that we really believe this stuff, and that allows us to go at a slower pace with less risk, with more intentionality. And that's hard for business owners to do because most people that want to start a business aren't hoping it's successful 10 years from now. They want it to be amazing at 1 year from now.
Yeah.
But the problem is the first year of business is your worst year of business, most likely, and the fifth year starts to get better. The 10th year, you're like, okay, I figured this out. Maybe you scaled a team if that's what you're aiming for. And then by 15 years in, you're like, all right, I figured this out. And then all of a sudden there's a succession plan to think about of like, okay, what do I do now? And that's the stage Dave is this legacy building stage where it's how do I pass this on to where it doesn't, crush the next people taking it over, whether that's family or someone else, and how do I do it in a way where it's a smooth handoff that doesn't destroy the business and what we've worked hard to build. And so that's the phase that we're in now, and that's part of having Ramsey personalities. That's a
Yeah.
big change, and that takes swallowing your pride and ego. When you built this place, it's built on one personality, Dave Ramsey, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden the Dave Ramsey show turns into the Ramsey show,
Mhm.
and it becomes about the big R versus about Dave himself. And so
Mhm.
that's hard to do as an entrepreneur, especially as you get later on in
Yeah.
life. And Dave jokes that you don't want to, throw the keys to the business when you're falling into the grave. That's not a good way
Mm.
to go. It
Mhm.
doesn't serve your heirs well. It doesn't serve the business well. And so you've got to be thinking about the long term and not just what am I going to do tomorrow.
Yeah. And speaking of that, with your new book, Breaking Free from Broke, Dave Ramsey called it the financial peace for the new generation. That's a hefty statement, George. What is it like filling those shoes?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm just like I look up and I'm like, "God, you chose me?" Like, I'm very grateful, but also like, why? You know what I mean? Like I'm no one had this on their bingo card. And so it's been really fun and humbling to just sit next to Dave, who I've looked up to for
Yeah,
so long, and sit next to him on the Ramsey show and he's looking at me going, all right, speak, my friend,
wow,
help these people. And so
yeah,
it's been a really fun challenge, not only because the principles are tried and true. We're
yeah,
not here to come up with baby step 8. The
right.
baby steps work. They're not broken, so don't fix
Mhm,
it. So the challenge for me was, how do I grapple with what people are going through in 2024 and beyond? How do I reach these next generations who maybe
mhm,
won't listen to, a 63-year-old bald white man, but maybe they'll listen to a 34-year-old guy with some more hair. And so, that's been a fun challenge to go, how do we infuse humor? How do we make this
mhm,
relatable? How do we bring in new research and new studies and new stories and analogies to really connect this to show people, hey, while the principles are 30 years old, they're not out of date. They're not out of touch. And so I've just modernized it with my own story of,
mhm,
hey, I lived this out in the last decade. You can too. I'm a
yeah,
normal guy. I didn't come from money. My parents are immigrants. And I just wanted to empower people to go, you have way more agency and autonomy over your life than you think you do. And
mhm,
just because you were born into this geographic location or socioeconomic place, it's not where you have to end up, and you can
yeah,
break those generational cycles and curses, and you can
yeah,
change your family tree and leave the legacy you want to live and live a life you're not exhausted by. And as a case study in that, it's easy for me to say it, but then also pointing to the millions of people who have done it and overcome the odds. Those are the
yeah.
ones that inspire me every day.
Oh, that's awesome. How can this book make a difference for our listeners who might be in different stages of building their business?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the personal finances are the start. And if you don't have that together, that is the prerequisite to starting a business. And if you don't have that foundation of, I'm out of debt, I've got the emergency fund, I understand all of the traps that are out there, you're going to get bombarded because business folks have the unique
Yeah.
ability to make a lot of mistakes with a lot of zeros on the end. And
Mhm.
there's so much more marketing and distractions toward entrepreneurs and business owners
Yeah.
because of how much of a trend it's become, especially for these younger generations. They're like, hey, I don't want to be like my mom and dad who worked for the same company
Mhm.
for 30 years just to hope to get a pension and retire one day. I want to live my best life now. I want to have wealth now. And so there's so many traps out there this book will help them avoid, to help them understand how the system is designed to keep them broke, to show them that it's not all their fault, but it's their responsibility, and to show them how to rise above it with peace and confidence and margin so that they can start this business with less risk and more intentionality and hopefully way more success.
Oh, I love that. Peace, confidence, and margin. It sounds so good. Feels good.
Feel
Um,
good story.
yeah,
And
it
I
is.
believe it. It's I say at the end of the book, I talk about this grappling with hope versus cynicism,
Mm.
because I was very cynical as a 23-year-old guy starting this journey. And I thought, the world just out to get me. Life is just happening to me. The system is designed to screw me over. Woe is me. I'm just going to sit here and hope someone else fixes everything. And I'm just going to complain on Twitter until someone does something about it. But the day that I looked in the mirror and said, hey, that guy's the problem and he's the solution, that's when everything changed. And as a business owner, it's easy to be like, well, in this market, it's just so hard. And that's why the business failed, instead of really going, hey, I wasn't a good steward of this money. I could have
Mm.
done better, with the strategy and the business plan instead of rushing into it. And we could talk all day about business mistakes that people have made out there, but at the end of the day, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And the best way is with less risk, more intentionality, and no debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for those who are a little further along in the journey, maybe they're not 20 anymore and they've made those mistakes. They could be hearing this and be like, "Oh, that's great for you. It's too late for me," but it's not too late. Doesn't
You can
matter
turn it
what stage.
around. Yeah,
Yeah.
we the some of the coolest debt-free screams are people who started businesses, maybe the business failed, they had all this debt to pay off, and they overcame the odds, whether it was through another business or through their
Yeah.
full-time W-2 job, and they pay off that debt, and they're in their 40s or 50s or even 60s, and those are the ones that really inspire me because it's not too late, and I've
Yeah.
had people reach out. I thought this book would reach the people you know, in their teens and 20s and 30s. What I didn't know was that people that are in their 50s would be reaching out saying, thank you for this book. It gave me hope that
Mhm.
it's not too late to turn my situation around. No one ever told me it was
So
possible for
good.
me. Thank you for that. And That's been really, really cool to see
Mm,
because it's true. I don't say it to just make you feel good. I
yeah.
say it because I've seen it done and I believe in that person reading the book that as long as you can fog up a mirror, you still got time.
Yes, there's hope for all of us, for sure. How has this journey to financial growth impacted your faith?
Oh man. Well, the best part is, and I say this in the acknowledgement section of the book, that I feel like a turtle on a fence post. And there's a quote that's like, "Hey, if you see a turtle on the fence post, you know it didn't get there by itself." And so
Mm,
one of the coolest parts about the financial growth is knowing that I didn't do this alone.
mm.
And it wasn't just the people around me and mentors and leaders, it was God. Like God brought me here and so he's going to see me through the next challenge and the next hard thing. And so it's hard to take credit cuz I know, me as this chucklehead 23-year-old, I didn't know what I was doing and I still don't know what I'm doing. And so it's beautiful to, as especially for entrepreneurs who want to just do it all themselves, the hardest thing to do is to let go and go, God, I need you to direct my steps. I am not able, I'm not smart enough, I'm not successful enough to do this the right way. So please intervene and step in and guide me to that next thing. And that's a really hard thing to do, especially because you got to do it every day. It's a
Yeah.
daily choice to go, listen, there's some things that are in my power and there's so much that's out of my control. And for those things, Dave likes to say, work like it all depends on you, pray like it all depends on God. And that is the best path to luck and success that I've ever seen. And if you don't have that combo, you may still get success, but you're not going to have a rich life that has sustainable joy in it.
Yeah, that's so true. People have this concept, I think, at times that once you reach a certain level in your income, you're secure, right? And you're just comfortable, but we still have to rely on him at every step, every stage because, we're not in control.
Yeah. And finances are just one aspect of your life. We've
Yeah,
seen people who are crushing it in business and
right.
yet it's crushing them and their marriage is falling apart and their
Yeah.
kids hate them. And
Mm.
those are really sad situations. And it just goes to show you that, we always said money isn't everything, but truly just being successful in business is one aspect of life and you
Mhm.
you can't have a flat tire. And that's where I think having that faith underpinning, relying on God is huge because of all the other aspects of your life that don't touch money.
Yeah, absolutely. And your book references the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians 5. How important is it to let God cultivate that in our character as we're becoming more successful, whatever area of success in life, right? Business and personal career, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, I think, especially for entrepreneurs, that verse, talking about the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control. Those are principles that we all want to aspire to. These are the virtues we're all really after. And money is just an obstacle that can hold us back from those things. And so when you can rise above that and money then becomes a tool to help you accomplish those things. And I allude to that with the chapter titles when I talk about wealth is patience, spending is self-control, generosity is
Mhm.
joy. I'm alluding to that. Of course, money can't provide these things. The Holy Spirit produces these things, Galatians says. But I do think that money's holding us back from those things, and following proven financial principles that are biblically based will help us flex those muscles, because when you can have that wealth is patience mentality, well, you can have patience in other areas of your life, including God's will for your life. And when you
Yeah.
have that spending is self-control, well, self-control and discipline, that's a biblical trait, and money is just one way to apply that. And so that's why I put that front and center right under the title of the book, because I think that's the person God designed us to be, and that is something worth chasing after.
Yeah, that's good. What has helped you remain humble as God has, increased you and even blessed you with having this platform to be able to serve people and give them hope? Being in the spotlight, it's not always easy and it comes with other things where you got to guard your heart a little bit more.
That's a great question. I think for me, God made me 5'6" for a reason. If I was 6 feet tall and good looking, like I think my head would explode. And so there's a piece of that I think is fun and true, and I always try to not take myself too seriously, and it's the reason I think, self-deprecation is a great tool to sort of humble yourself in a healthy way. But also, here at Ramsey, it's hard to get an ego because I know Sarah's right here and she made all this happen and she got the cameras going and the mic going. I can't do much for myself. And if you look in the book, the acknowledgement section, it feels like
Yeah,
an entire chapter of all the
yeah,
people that touched this thing to make it happen. And so I feel so blessed that I get to come in and do the thing that I enjoy doing, that I'm hopefully good at doing some days. and the rest is on other people who are good at what they do. And so truly it's hard to take credit single-handedly for anything around here. And I think entrepreneurs, you know, it can feel like you're doing it alone, but once you delegate and you have a team, you go, "Oh my gosh, like the
Mm,
thing that you end up building is
mm,
largely not because of you, it's
mm,
because you got the right people in place and you had good leadership." And so that to me is a humbling thing when you can just realize I'm not doing this alone, whether it's support from family or the team. You know, anytime you think I single-handedly did this, that's I think where ego becomes really unhealthy. And obviously with a spiritual angle, you know, Dave always says I'm better than I deserve. And people don't understand
yeah,
that's a statement of salvation and spirituality
mm,
that, you know,
mm,
Dave on his own volition, he could have done all of this, but he also knows what he deserved. And you know,
mm,
the wrath of hell and
yeah,
all these things, and God gave his only son so that we could have eternal salvation and a
yeah,
relationship with him in heaven. I think that's a beautiful reminder that apart from God, life is number one, meaningless, and number two, we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for his hand guiding us even through our mistakes and in spite of our own mistakes. And I'm a living picture of a guy who, in
mm.
spite of all his mistakes, somehow finds some semblance of success.
Oh, yeah, such a good reminder for all of us every day. We constantly need that reminder for sure. Well, thank you so much, George. This has been so much fun. Can you let everyone know how they can connect with you, how they can support your book, and all the things?
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear from your listeners at George Kamel with a K, Kamel on Instagram and wherever you hang out on social media. Would love to hear from you guys. And of course, if you want to grab a copy of the book or gift it to people in your life to say, hey, there's hope. I believe in your financial journey. You can get it at ramseysolutions.com, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get your books, it's out there. Even the public library. If you don't want to spend a dime, I just want to get this message out there and get it into people's hands to give them some hope.
And it's good. It's not your typical finance book. It's not boring. It's a lot of fun. So
You can
highly
read it.
recommend it.
Audiobook is especially fun because
Yeah,
I read it myself. I did
that's
custom
fun.
music and there's sound of design
Oh,
and all these
cool.
things, but it's been fun to see people who said, "I haven't read a book since high school, and I read this thing in 2 or 3 days." That's been encouraging to me because it speaks to the fact that I tried to write a book that even I can
Mm.
understand, that isn't stuffy money stuff, but also it's very in-depth and, it's very readable. So I hope your listeners enjoy it.
Yeah, and I will link all of that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, George.
Thank you, Joe. You're doing great work out there.
Hey, friend, are you looking for actionable ways that you can build a profitable business without compromising your faith? Check out my free 5-day devotional for Christian entrepreneurs. For 5 days, you'll get a daily devotional teaching you specific things you can start doing right now to honor God as you're growing your business. Get it for free at thevirtualmama.com/devo or click the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Business in His Image podcast with me, your host, Joe Harris. If this show has blessed you, please share it with a friend and subscribe so that you can be notified when we release new episodes. My prayer is that God will help you soak up every bit of what you've heard today and help you apply it to your business so that you can see results. I'll see you next time, and may God bless you.